2020. And this is episode 10 of Rob Explains, your daily podcast discussing and explaining cool, random, and interesting things. I'm Rob. Thanks for joining me. As we head toward another day of remembrance for Americans, that of course being September 11th, I thought it would be fitting to go into some topics that haven't been covered broadly, or at least I find people don't know a lot about. So we'll take a little side trip here and talk a little bit about the events and the people and everyone involved in 9/11/2001. So by now, everyone is aware that Osama bin Laden, who was a Saudi national based in Afghanistan, planned and carried out through a network of supporters the 9/11 attacks. And after 9/11, we heard a lot about this organization called Al-Qaeda. And that is what I want to get into as today's topic. What is Al-Qaeda exactly? Where did it come from? And why is it such a buzzword in the days, weeks, years, and now decades since 9/11? Well, the attacks on September 11th, 2001 can actually be traced back to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. That became a proxy war during the Cold War. Now, a proxy war was a war fought between the United States and the Soviet Union, although not directly. The balance of the Cold War was found because the Soviet Union and the Americans never actually confronted each other directly. We did so through intermediaries, whether on one side, the other, or both. In Korea, the Americans supported the South Koreans while the Soviet Union supported the North Koreans. In large part, we were arming and training and supporting indirectly the local forces on the ground. However, there were occasions where American pilots were facing off against North Korean pilots, where South Korean pilots were facing off against Soviet fighters. And although it's one of those secrets of the Cold War, there were in fact times where Soviet pilots and American pilots faced off against each other. But it was for the Koreans and as an ally and not directly. So it wouldn't lead to World War III. The same happened in Vietnam, where the Soviet Union supported North Vietnam and the Americans supported South Vietnam, giving arms and training and support. In this case, however, the Americans poured thousands, hundreds of thousands of troops into the area, not wanting to let another domino fall to the communists. And because we had so much success in Korea at finding a stalemate, there was a belief that that would be able to be sustained in Vietnam as well, ignoring the entire history of the region and all of the feelings of the locals. We wanted to institute our own beliefs in that place. And this would repeat all across the globe in different small proxy wars between interested parties, whether it was a civil war where each country backed a different side, or the overthrow of a government supported by one country and those who were overthrowing them were supported by the other. But in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union directly invaded. At that point, Afghanistan was on the border with the Soviet Union, and they felt as though they could expand outward additional territory and bring in the resources that the region had. Now, the Americans couldn't actually go to war directly against the Soviet Union because that might result in World War III. So instead, what we did was to find people on the ground there and support them. Now, the major factions fighting the Soviets in the Afghanistan, one of them was the Taliban. Another was the Northern Alliance, which was a group of tribes in the northern area of Afghanistan. So we found different local leaders and we supplied them with arms and we supplied them with training. And if you'd like more information on this, I can tell you that there is a movie called Charlie Wilson's War, starring Tom Hanks, that is very informative and gets down to the point of everything we did in Afghanistan. But the important point to kind of think about here is that we were not the only ones supporting people in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was, after all, a majority Muslim country, and most of the rest of the Muslim world saw the Soviet incursion as godless people trying to impart their will on Muslims. So they wanted to send their support as well. And this is where the son of a Saudi millionaire, multimillionaire, one of the lesser known sons at that time, and some others got together to try to figure out how to send guns and trainers and just money as necessary into Afghanistan. The Mujahideen was formed as a group that would be holy warriors bringing jihad to the Soviets in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden, who is the son of a Saudi construction magnate, and Abdullah Azzam, who is a Palestinian Sunni Islamic scholar, began building a financial network of people all through the Muslim world: Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Turkey, Jordan, obviously Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait. And they started to make connections between people and build the functions of getting that money, grouping it together, and getting it to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to help support the war. Now, this financial support, this network of not necessarily laundering money, but moving money from one place to another and getting it in the hands of the people who needed it, was called the base. That's the base of the Mujahideen. The base, translated into Arabic, is Al-Qaeda. They called it Al-Qaeda. And in fact, there was a scholar who said that for all of the credit we give Al-Qaeda, in reality, it was a list of names and phone numbers in a filing cabinet in a cave in Afghanistan. Because later on, after the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan and the Taliban took over and they imparted their version of Islam on the country. By the way, as a side note of history, the Taliban was embraced by the United States as the ones who had defeated the Soviets and then united the country. They were brought to the United States and met with President Reagan, President Bush, the first President Bush. They met with Donald Rumsfeld and others. But they were so thankful for the Mujahideen and Al-Qaeda, as much as you might call it, that the group in support of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden and Abdullah Azzam, that they invited them to come to Afghanistan and they invited them to stay there. At the time, in the early 90s, Al-Qaeda, or Osama bin Laden's network, was actually located in Sudan. And they were responsible for some attacks on U.S. embassies in Africa. It is said that they take credit for the events that were later chronicled in Black Hawk Down in Somalia, and many attacks across the African continent. And Osama bin Laden was known amongst people in the United States intelligence community as the leader of this network of terrorists who were attacking U.S. assets. And he was doing this because after the Gulf War in 1991, the U.S. did not remove their assets from the holiest of holy lands. And we were invited into Saudi Arabia in order to stop the invasion of Saudi Arabia and keep it from happening when Saddam had moved into Kuwait and then was looking to invade Saudi Arabia. We then reinvaded Kuwait and pushed on into Iraq. But we left assets, even after that war was over, in Saudi Arabia. We kept our bases there. We kept our bases in Kuwait. We kept our bases in Jordan. And this upset people who did not want American soldiers in Saudi Arabia. And it may be hard for people to understand, but imagine if some country invaded Italy and built a military base right outside the Vatican. That would upset a lot of Catholics. If someone went into Jerusalem and built a military base right outside of it, that would upset a lot of Christians. That these places are holy to people who hold those religions holy. And the idea that an outside military force would essentially occupy that country was upsetting to them. And they thought that through terrorist tactics, they could impine the Americans to leave. So they began in Africa, but once they knew they were being chased, they then sought the protection of the Taliban government in Afghanistan and moved there. And through the late 1990s, they were located in Afghanistan. That is, of course, where the major planning portions of the 9/11 attacks occurred, between there and the Philippines, where a lot of planners went back and forth. And of course, after the attacks, when the perpetrators were identified, it was Afghanistan that we turned our attention to. And when the Taliban wouldn't stop their protection of Osama bin Laden, we invaded. But I tell you that story to tell you this. It is easy to make generalizations. It is easy to say, Al-Qaeda, this group of terrorists. But sometimes the important things are in the detail. Al-Qaeda is merely a list of names of financiers. The group itself does not call themselves Al-Qaeda. Some of the subgroups, the remaining groups, do now because they want to hold on to that name and the fear that it brings in the West. Osama bin Laden would not have called his group Al-Qaeda. He would have referred to the financiers of his network as Al-Qaeda. And words have power. And we need to make sure that when we call a thing something, that it's accurate. But now you know the history of Al-Qaeda and what it really is. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Rob Explains. Look for new episodes daily wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. Find us online on all social media at Rob Explains. Got a comment, question, or query? Or did I get something wrong and you want to correct me? Shoot me an email, rob@robexplains.com, or you can leave a comment down below. I'll check those right after the show goes live. And you can send me a message, anchor.fm/RobExplains/message. And in the form of a voicemail, I can actually include it in a future episode. Once again, thank you for joining me. Until next time, this is Rob. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great day.